The inevitable has happened. McLaren's drivers made contact. Lando Norris ran into Oscar Piastri and basically shoved him off the track. And the collision was actually pretty intense, especially if you were to see it from Lando Norris's, or rather Oscar Piastri's perspective. And the worst part of the contact is that they were basically at the whim of the FIA in terms of deciding what they were going to do about that collision. So what do I mean by that? If the FIA had come back, which they did, and said that this is just a racing incident, then what leg would McLaren have to stand on to tell Lando Norris to give the position back to Oscar Piastri? They would have been going directly against the racing director, the FIA stewards, who said that it was a racing incident. By the way, racing incident is a term that almost all Formula One fans want to hear more often. So if they would have gone against that, then they would have confirmed to the fans what fans have been kind of complaining about, which is the fact that McLaren has been interfering with the race between the two drivers. And so for that reason, McLaren could not do anything. And that really frustrated Oscar Piastri, and rightfully so. Because here's the thing, we don't know how much aggression Oscar Piastri has been holding back on a leash. He could be one of the more aggressive drivers that we've seen in Formula One. He could be up there with Max Verstappen or classic Lewis Hamilton levels of aggression, classic Sebastian Vettel levels of aggression, and he's been, putting a lid on it because of papaya rules. Or perhaps we've seen the peak of Oscar Piastri's aggression, and now it's time for Lando Norris to get the elbows out during the race. Thing is, we don't know, and this should have been a problem, an unknown that McLaren should have solved for a lot earlier in the season. In the first half of the season, the McLaren cars were absolutely dominant. That's when you figure out which driver is also dominant. That way you can back the dominant driver in the dominant car. We've got 6 races to go, and McLaren is finally figuring out which one they want to back, or I don't even know if they've figured out which one they want to back, but the evidence is finally coming in, and with 6 races to go, they've got to make a decision. And in the meantime, Max Verstappen is only 63 points away from McLaren's World Drivers' Championship leader. Ladies and gentlemen, that's not something that should have happened. Piastri is leading with 336 points. Norris has got 314. And Verstappen has got 273 points. The gulf between McLaren's top driver and the third place driver, who, by the way, is racing in a technically 4th place car. The gap between McLaren's top driver and third place should actually be a lot bigger by now. Now, granted, Piastri did have the worst race in modern Formula One history the other day, so the gap could have been closer to 325 points than 350. But let's just kind of talk about that for a quick second. Let me find the picture. Let me find the picture that I was looking for. Insert an image. You know what? I'm gonna have to go look it up. Looking it up. There we are. Yes. Team standings. McLaren has 650 points. I'll say it again. McLaren has 650 points in the Constructors' Championship, and Mercedes, a distant second, has 325. And we'll take it all the way down to Red Bull, has got 290. So even if we talk the runner-up for the Constructors' Championship, that is a 325-point lead over the runner-up. If McLaren does not win a Drivers' Championship with a Constructors' Championship lead of 325 points, I don't care how much McLaren says that they don't care about the Drivers' Championship. It is a mathematical embarrassment. It's a mathematical embarrassment if McLaren doesn't win the Drivers' Championship. And if you can't win the Drivers' Championship with the fastest cars, you only need to look into two other places. One is the drivers. Are your drivers somehow subpar? I don't think so. Are the McLaren drivers as perfect drivers when it comes to pressure as Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton? No. Are they capable of winning a Drivers' Championship? Yes. Okay. Well, that's place one. What about management? Management is the only other place that we can look if you have a Drivers' Championship, a Constructors' Championship, with that much of a lead. And yet you've got somebody from outside of the team who is kind of starting to challenge for the championship. You got to look at management. And I think management is the problem. In not backing a driver or letting them race full out, they left their drivers in limbo and opened the door to the disorganization that the drivers currently find themselves in a point scenario in which Max Verstappen can still win a Drivers' Championship from behind the wheel of a fourth place car. I think Zach Brown has wanted to be liked too much by the public and wanted to be liked too much by the drivers, and that has left him in a place where he did not make the tough decision. Christian Horner makes the tough decision, or made the tough decisions. Toto Wolff made the tough decisions, and do both of those team principles sometimes rub the public in the wrong way? Yeah, but guess what? They're Drivers' Championship team principles. Zach Brown is yet to be, and I think that, again, mathematically, that's an embarrassment if it doesn't go down. We've got 6 races left, and we don't know who the dominant driver is. I've been watching the season, and if I were a betting man, which I'm not, but if I were, I wouldn't know who to put my money on, because we haven't seen Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris drive completely unfettered. We've got Red Bull, they've figured themselves out. Ferrari's kind of figured themselves out. And we have Mercedes, who's definitely figuring themselves out. That's what happens halfway through the season, or more than halfway through the season. There's typically a more dominant car in the beginning, especially under these regulations. And then as you go forward, the other teams catch up, and that's exactly what they're doing now. You should have had your lead driver picked out, and that driver should have been picking up as many points as possible. That's not where we are, and where we are is in a really tough place for McLaren. I do hope, for the sake of either Oscar Piastri or Lando Norris, and just for the interest of the sport, that somebody from McLaren wins the Drivers' Championship. And do I think mathematically is that still a very strong possibility that they will? Yeah, absolutely. But we're in territory that we shouldn't be in this late in the season. So anyway, that's my take on what's going on with McLaren. Let's talk about George Russell, then we'll move to Ferrari and the FIA after that. And I'm gonna kind of look at my notes. George Russell has entered beast mode, and he's now one of my favorite drivers on the grid. And it's all down to attitude and skill. He was unwell in his last race, or the one previous to this. He had an upper respiratory tract infection and still managed to, I think he podiumed. He's been under contract woes and the heat of Singapore. And you can tell by body language and stuff. I think that the heat affects some drivers more. And in this particular race, I think that the heat was really beating up George Russell. And somehow he fought through that discomfort and still won. And this was not a fluke of a race. This was a race where George shared the podium with the fastest driver on the current grid right now, in this our year 2025. He shared the podium with Max Verstappen. He's the fastest driver on the grid right now. And he shared the podium with the fastest car on the grid, a McLaren. So it wasn't a fluke. It wasn't some race where the lead pack wasn't the lead pack. This was George Russell being at the front of the lead pack. And I think that he has earned a little bit more respect from Mercedes than he's getting. And I think because of that reason, Maybe he's starting to understand his old teammate and rival, Lewis Hamilton, a little bit more. He did that amazing tribute photograph. I think that was very cool. It's a very good touch. So skill and attitude, he's becoming one of my favorites. In Ferrari, Lewis Hamilton's decision to pit for soft tires at lap 47 and then come within overtaking distance of one fast. Kimi Antonelli in a very strong Mercedes showed classic Lewis Hamilton racecraft and driver ability. I don't think he's cooked. I don't think he's washed. I think he still has a lot of driving and drive, pun slightly intended, left in him. And sadly, the brake failure in his car and the lift and coast order for one Charles Leclerc showed Ferrari's classic engineering weaknesses. And there were another couple of weaknesses that I sadly have to point out. F1's inability to be curious about why Hamilton was dropping back. Like, all you have to do is look at the leaderboard, and a director would just have to be like, I wonder why that's happening. Maybe we should put a camera on that. So F1's inability to be curious about why Hamilton was dropping back and put a camera on it showed F1 TV's inability to give racing fans what they want: racing coverage. Racing fans want racing coverage. And F1 TV, they showed that they would sooner show a driver's partner in a stoic yet awkward stance then, they would rather put a camera on that than on the race. They would rather put a camera on Lance Stroll's family awkwardly and uninterestedly watching a flat screen TV. They would rather put the camera on that than watching a 7.5-time world champion driving heroically toward the podium and then falling off like crazy into the clutches of his old rival in Alonso. They would rather show anything but the race. They'd rather show anything but Lewis Hamilton overtaking Carlos Sainz, who just had a podium last week. They would rather show so many things than the actual race, and then they wonder why racing fans, or the way they said it, the younger racing fans aren't interested in Formula One. Well, you take cars that can barely pass, and then you don't highlight, you don't put it on camera when they finally do pass. You take cars that aren't very exciting, and not only do you not show the exciting parts, you show celebrities and partners and all that kind of stuff. And I'm sure they're all nice people, but that's not what I came to watch when I turn on a race. And then I think, lastly, but not least, the FIA. I could have forgiven the FIA's decision to penalize Hamilton for track limits. I could have forgiven that decision. It's true. It happened. Track limits did happen. But at least remove the phrase leaving the track without justifiable reason. I don't know. You ask me, and brake failure is kind of the lead justifiable reason for leaving a track as a racing driver. So either FIA, you're not paying attention to the race, or maybe even worse, you don't care. That's my take on it. But it's not all bad. We've got 6 races to go, and it could be one of the most exciting drivers' championship campaigns that we've seen in years. It's now a 3-way battle. It didn't have to be that way. McLaren could have secured the Drivers' Championship, or at least made it more secure, had they started to invest in a singular driver earlier on in the season. But hey, we are where we are now, and we've got what is effectively a 3-way battle, and so that's exciting. Enjoy. Unless you're McLaren, you probably won't enjoy that. Anyway, that was the Singapore GP. I've been Dalton, you've been great, and this has been the Petrolist. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next race. Well, I'll see you next week, but also next race. All right, I'm out.